This is a reading of Awakening, a Matter of Life or Death, Chapter 2 by Salim Michael. If the aspirant wants to be really serious in what she is trying to attain spiritually, which alone can give meaning to her existence, she must realize from the depths of herself that the aim of any concentration effort she tries to undertake during her meditation or in her active life, whether that is while walking outside, speaking, eating, washing, etc., is to create a radical change in her being, or, in other words, makes her die to herself. It is about dying to her individuality, as she is used to experiencing it, which is indispensable to allow the superior aspect of a double nature to begin to subtly reveal itself to her in a vision. Nevertheless, there is hidden within her, as there is in any other human being, an apprehension when faced with the necessity of going through this inner death. Dying to herself, to her customary state of being, to which she is, unbeknownst to herself, passionately attached, is what seems unacceptable to her. She falters before such a formidable eventuality. In fact, despite the suffering that the descent into matter involves, she is deeply attached to this form of existence, without ever seeing how it obscures the light within her. Furthermore, despite all the faults she may see in herself, she loves herself as she is, because, deep down within her, she senses that the disappearance of her ordinary individuality inevitably means she will lose the possibility of continuing to enjoy all the sensory pleasures the phenomenal world offers her. But what does one really want? The impossible to be accomplished? Light and dark to coexist? Air, which is a more subtle element, to be able to enter into a vast, already full of muddy water, and to feel it? It is necessary for any sincere aspirant to come to understand, through lived experience and not through what she is told, that it is precisely when she succeeds at certain moments in being really present to herself and conscious in a way that is entirely inhabitual to her, that this particular death can begin to occur within her. If she succeeds in really experiencing it, it will subsequently leave a very special sentiment within her. The sentiment of the beginning of a liberation from what she usually is. The torments she ceaselessly undergoes, her apprehension of tomorrow, and the grueling demands of her desires. It is an experience that she will never be able to forget. After many attempts to remain present to herself, and after numerous failures, she will have to come to realize in all humility that contrary to what she might believe, thinking and being truly present to herself are two things as distinct from one another as heaven and earth. If the seeker is really motivated in her desire to know herself, she will come, thanks to repeated experiences, to admit that, effectively, what has just been said is not an arbitrary exaggeration, but an undeniable truth. She must understand in all seriousness that simply thinking, as one is in the habit of doing in daily life, is neither more nor less than dreaming, and will take her nowhere spiritually. Being truly present to herself inwardly requires a conscious effort on her part, a very specific effort that is impossible for her to experience ordinarily and which at the beginning is not easy to make. It is only by way of these efforts of presence, which she must renew with untiring patience, that it will be possible for her one day to find again the celestial source whence she originally emerged. An aspirant who ardently seeks to apprehend the reason why it is so difficult for her at the beginning of this spiritual journey to accept this death to herself cannot fail to notice that being truly inwardly present demands of her a letting go, a renunciation of herself and everything that she is attached to and that futilely captures her attention in life. Now, this letting go, this renunciation of herself, which is the beginning of this inner death, repels her. If a seeker wants to be entirely honest with herself and agree to take a detached look at what her existence has been and ask herself if she has ever experienced a single moment in her life when she has done, looked at, or listened to something while being fully present to herself, without being divided and lost in her familiar dreams and desires, she will perhaps be very surprised by her answer. Such an experience, namely, to sense within herself a living presence beyond anything she is permitted to experience habitually, which can only be the result of a particular effort, cannot help but, if she really succeeds in experiencing it, bring to the fore of her being the ineffable she has always carried within her without knowing it. It is a most sublime sentiment that will remain indelibly implanted in her consciousness. She must come to realize that to truly accomplish something with the whole of herself inevitably demands the renunciation in the here and now of all her ordinary desires, her futile dreams, her imaginings, which are devoid of reality, her habitual feeling of herself, and so on, toward which she is, perhaps without knowing it, profoundly attached. In fact, succeeding in doing, looking at, or listening to something with all her being inevitably involves an inner death, which the aspirant must, in the end, agree to undergo at every moment of her life. This approach will bring her a knowledge, and above all, a feeling of herself that are both out of the ordinary, that she will not be able to help wanting to find them again, whatever the price that must be paid. Most people engaged on a spiritual path show a certain reluctance when they are told about the necessity of this inner death. Thus, to justify themselves, they put forward all sorts of arguments, such as, But it is said that at the end of time, everyone will attain liberation or will become enlightened. Or they transform the Sermon on the Mount given by Christ to his disciples into a promise that the kingdom of heaven will be open to all, including prostitutes and the destitute in spirit. Does simple logic not require one to say, yes, quite probably, but not just any prostitute? Furthermore, destitute in spirit certainly does not mean devoid of spirit. Moving from the personal to the impersonal inevitably involves dying to oneself, to one's customary individuality. The seeker must realize that her life, which she takes for granted, does not belong to her. Just like her attention, her life is only temporarily entrusted to her. And when the time accorded her to live has passed, what she has done with the gift of her life will inevitably determine her fate. She will gravitate either toward a supremely beatific state of being and consciousness that will fulfill her, or towards a state of profound sadness and regret that it will be too late for her to be able to change. After death, human beings, whether they are kings, mystics, or vagrants, cannot help but, due to an inexorable mathematical law that governs the whole cosmos, gravitate to a level of being and consciousness corresponding to what they have attained at the final moment of their existence on earth. Whether that level is very elevated, ordinary, or poor. In fact, what is generally called Judgment Day in reality means that all human beings will, at the end of their earthly sojourns, be judged, so to speak, by themselves. That is, they will not be able to do otherwise, regardless of what they may wish, than be drawn to a state of being and consciousness that is their own. Just as a star cannot avoid gravitating according to its weight and mass in a location in space that corresponds to it, by which it remains imprisoned. How poignantly must the seeker sense the impermanence of all that has taken shape in the cosmos, and that birth into this existence, with all that it involves by way of pain and suffering, is the true death. Whereas what is generally taken for death is, and must be, a very particular initiation to the true life, of which the world, tragically attached to form, is ignorant. So few people prepare in their lifetime for this crucial moment. Every evening after her meditation, the aspirant must sit on her bed and rest for a while in order to prepare herself before going to bed, because of the importance of the last thought she will take with her into her sleep, and which will inevitably determine what the next day will be for her spiritually. At the hour of her death, before entering into her last and longest sleep, how much more determined will be the last thought she takes with her at that fateful moment. A last thought that will not only determine the state in which she will find herself when she quits this world, but also what her future destiny and her future existence will be, whatever form that existence takes and wherever it takes place. Every evening, she must ask herself what she really expects from life, what this spiritual work means to her, and what importance she should accord it. She must renew the decision to give herself with all of herself to what caused her inwardly and appreciate the opportunity offered her to be able to work on herself spiritually. She must realize that the day will come when this possibility no longer exists, because when that monumental moment comes, there will be no more tomorrow for her. Why such insistence on the necessity for the seeker to find within her a very different consciousness from that she habitually knows? Why is it necessary to repeat again and again how important it is for her to struggle to remain present to herself, to cultivate a particular presence to herself, which alone will allow her to experience a luminous consciousness that the Tibetan Book of the Dead sometimes calls a clear consciousness and sometimes a clear light, and of which this treatise says that if the aspirant does not come to recognize it in her lifetime, she will be unable to succeed in doing so after her death, and will even find herself troubled by it to the point of wishing to flee it. Given the way so many seekers today approach a spiritual path, it seems very difficult, even impossible for them to grasp the gravity of such a warning, to which the Tibetan Book of the Dead returns continually, insisting on the fact that if the aspirant does not succeed during her meditation practices in recognizing this state of consciousness, which at first gives her the impression of being only a void or emptiness, she will not be able to accept, after her departure from this world, dying to her ordinary individuality, in order to immerse herself in this void or emptiness, which will seem to her to be a disquieting nothing, but in fact, it is made up of a clear consciousness without shape or color, which is her true original identity.